Okay, please give a big welcome to Janet Fielding. Now, there's a question that I've been wanting to ask you for a while now.
Does it involve shoes?
It doesn't.
That's a shame.
It's, I understand that you have special knowledge on this subject, so I'm going to ask you, what is the difference between a quasar and a pulsar?
Well, this panel started off well. There's no question this has started off on a high. Well, a pulsar pulses.
There you go.
It goes like that.
Exactly.
It
It's
rotates.
like a lighthouse.
Yeah.
In case you don't recognize that, that was from a documentary that was filmed for the theater screening of Logopolis.
With a Jodrell Bank. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you have your first 2 seasons on Doctor Who out on Blu-ray now.
Yep.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing, and there may be more to come.
I would imagine that the 20th anniversary season would definitely be one of the ones that they would want to release.
I would think so.
Yeah.
In fact, I know so.
Were you in one of the screenings? Did you attend one?
No.
Oh, okay.
They never invite me anywhere.
Oh.
And I'm so well behaved.
So Logopolis was done in 1981? 80, 81?
80, 81, yeah. Over the Christmas, December, January, 80, 81.
And so here it is now being shown in cinemas worldwide.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that, what does that feel like? Is that an amazing experience to have that come back the way it does and that it never kind of dies away?
I know, it's weird, isn't it? It really is weird. 40 years ago, next year.
Wow.
I've had to put up with Peter Davison for that long.
That's the kind of panel this is going to be.
Actually, in all fairness, I think I've explained to a number of you, I'm only ever nice about Peter behind his back. Never to his face. He'd just get uppity.
Tell us a little bit about growing up in Australia. Since most of us have never been, I've never been.
Okay.
You know, so I assume that you had a pet koala and you rode a
Obviously.
kangaroo to school.
Obviously. Well, I was, my mother flew down from Cloncurry, which is in the outback, to have me. Because my father was based up in Cloncurry for 18 months, working out a program to eradicate the 4 major cattle diseases from Australia. Because the thing about Australia is it's a very delicate ecology, which the British managed to mess up a lot by importing things like rabbits, and foxes, and whatever.
Rabbits?
Mind you, they did something similar here, didn't they? And convicts. I am descended from convicts. Way to go, Grandma. My great-great-grandmother was transported for stealing 2 geese.
Oh, wow.
And her husband was transported for stealing a bolt of cloth. And years later, I met a guy who said, oh, really, my grandmother was transported for stealing 2 geese. We checked, what was her name, what was my grandmother. And it wasn't the same woman. And I think what happened in those days was they were short of women in the colony. So they went, 2 geese, 2 geese, 2 geese, out.
Wow.
And my great-great-grandmother had the last laugh because she died mistress of all she surveyed. This sort of beautiful farm in the Mary Valley, north of Brisbane, which is where my dad's from. And so I grew up in Brisbane mostly. Lots of, playing in the bush. We'd all used to go down to the bush to play, and nobody ever worried about that. A bit like you'd go to the woods, Nobody worried about poisonous snakes or spiders. They might have been hoping. You never know.
Was acting something that you wanted to do from an early age, or were there other ambitions that you had growing up?
No, what happened was I was in my first year at university, and I think I'd been to the theatre once, and that was I'd been to the ballet once, and I'd been to see The King and I at a theatre in Washington DC because my father was in. We were in Washington for a year doing. Dad was doing research at Walter Reed at the Army Medical Headquarters. He was doing research on malaria. Anyway, so I can remember I went to the theatre in Washington, but I don't remember ever going otherwise. And then we were in the English department at university. We were doing rehearsed readings from the English course, and they were doing The Miller's Tale. And Geoffrey Rush and Billy Brown, the three of us did The Miller's Tale, and then Geoffrey and Billy persuaded me to audition for the newly formed State Theatre Company. I knew nothing. I mean nothing. And that's how it started. So blame Geoffrey Rush.
What was your first professional acting job?
That was it. That was Wrong Side of the Moon, it was called. I played Rapunzel. And in the beginning of Act 2, they used to wheel on a truck, and everybody who came into the act was down behind the truck. And I used to sit there, with the long plait, going, oh look, there's a breeze blowing through the tops of the trees. And Geoffrey and Billy were down behind the truck going, what a good time, girlie, I can show you a good time. And waving dollar bills at me.
None of that's on film, I'm sure, sadly.
No. I found the program the other day with everybody's autograph on it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Billy's now dead, unfortunately, but but Geoffrey is still very much alive.
Was acting something that your parents supported?
Absolutely not. Are you crazy? My parents were responsible people.
What would they rather have you done?
Anything.
Anything.
Anything else. Streetwalker, was more acceptable.
Was it a matter of, I'm doing research to cure malaria and you're going to go into acting?
I know. See, two of my brothers are doctors and one's a dentist. And the one who's a dentist has done a PhD in military epidemiology. So as you can tell, I'm a family underachiever. I'm not a real person. So getting Doctor Who was kind of a relief because they knew and loved Doctor Who.
Oh, that's good. So what was their reaction when you were able to tell them the news?
Well, they were astounded. Which is, touching that they had such faith in me. But they were astounded.
Now, I've heard this story. Tell us if this is true or not, that you told a little fib in order to get the role of Tegan.
I may have done.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was, John Nathan Turner asked me how tall I am. And I didn't lie about my height. Okay, I said I was 5'2". Okay, I might have stretched it by half an inch, quarter of an inch. But I said, 5'2", minimum height requirement for an air stewardess in Australia. Of course, for the Eastern airlines like Singapore and Thai, it's even shorter because, of course, the women tend to be smaller. I think you can safely say I was improvising. Anyway, John was quite impressed by my improvisation. He knew the truth. I didn't realise that till much later. He knew that I was too short. But it doesn't matter on the screen because...
That's what I've always wondered. He really was going to care that you weren't the right height? Okay.
I think so. So, because if you think about it, so that's a small person standing in front of a big person. And as you move out like that, so, as soon as you stand in front of somebody...
Tell us about, what was your first day on set for Doctor Who? What was the first thing that you were asked to do?
Well, it was filming. It was on. I think it was either on that ice cold lay-by, or it was actually doing the house, getting in the car with my Aunt Vanessa, Delore Whiteman.
In those days, you would always do the location work first and then go in the studio
That's
and
right.
do everything else. There wasn't a whole lot of location for Logopolis. A lot of it was in studio.
Yeah, because like that, you know, how would you do Logopolis on location? Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, apart from that, those couple of scenes, yeah. So what used to happen was you do filming for 5 days, and then, well, sometimes it was 5. And then you do 10 days rehearsal, 2 days studio, 10 days rehearsal, 3 days studio. If there was no filming, you'd do 10 days rehearsal, 3 days studio, 10 days rehearsal, 3 days studio. Yeah, it was. But we used to make, so we made that would be 4 23-minute episodes. Yeah, but quite a fast turnaround, especially given that you're doing a load of special effects.
Much different now when they take 9, 10, 11 months to film a 10-episode season.
Yeah.
Yeah, very different. So
45 minutes.
Was that your first time in Studio Center?
Yeah. It was really, I mean, all I'd done before that on camera was a couple of lines in a Hammer House of Horror. Yeah. So it was really my first telly.
Right.
And nobody gave you much help, let me tell you. They just, go on, get on with it.
You weren't there for very long before Tom left, but
Yeah.
what was the change in sort of, this sounds like it's fishing for some, dirt, but I'm not looking for that. What was the change in the atmosphere from production from when Tom was there and when Peter came in?
I believe there's no sort of secret to the fact that Tom was quite difficult especially towards the end. And I certainly found him thus. But, and Peter was a lot easier, to get along with. I was the only person in the whole of Britain that had not seen All Creatures Great and Small. I was, because all these women were going, oh my God, you're so lucky to be working with Peter Davison. Oh my God, he's so good. And you go, really? Oh well. Yeah.
Did you know much Doctor Who growing up?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Gosh, yeah. In Australia, yeah, it was big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your memories of it, and what was one of your favorite things that you recall seeing?
Well, I suppose my childhood doctor, in a way, really was Patrick Troughton. Although I did see the William Hartnells, but I was a bit young, really.
Yeah.
It was Patrick Troughton. Yeah.
He was amazing.
Yeah, he was. He was. And he was amazing as a person as well. Naughty. Very, very naughty. Respect.
When you first come into the cast, there's Tom and Sarah Sutton and Matthew Waterhouse. What was the feeling like amongst them? Was there much of a family feeling amongst them that you kind of felt, that you were intruding on, or was it embracive?
Did I say that Tom was difficult?
I know Tom was, so did the rest of you bond because of that, or did he really set the tone for everything?
Help. No, it wasn't close. It wasn't. And Sarah and I became quite good friends, and still are. Matthew was sort of on his own because he was a fan of the show, and we were actors. He came out of a different background, so he wasn't really an actor. He didn't understand a lot of the etiquette of acting. Hence his helpful suggestions to Richard Todd about how Richard might benefit from finding his light on the set. Richard made some of Britain's best-known movies of the 40s, 50s and 60s. So Richard had been a big movie star. But you know, you can always benefit from a little extra help.
Someone hinted that I should ask you about that, and I wasn't planning to. So I'm glad you brought it up for, for the person that asked you.
I mean, you know, Matthew handles it quite well, you know. So
Poor guy.
no.
Moving into the...
As if I'd victimise him.
Moving into season 19, the second or third story in is Kenda.
Yep.
Now, when you first see that script and you see how much Tegan is gonna, I mean, it really gave you a chance to do some good acting, I thought.
Yeah.
Were you excited about doing that one?
Yeah, I was. It was a great cast. It was a really, really interesting script, and I got some fun stuff to do. What's not to like?
Yeah.
Hey, that was good fun. It was a great story.
What was your favorite memory from season 19?
What's my favourite memory? Well, I certainly enjoyed filming on Concord. That was good. Yeah. And what else? I loved doing Kinder. I really enjoyed that, and I remember things like Visitation, you know, because that was a beautiful house on the Thames, very historic house. So that was amazing.
We had Edward Russell up here earlier, and we were talking a little bit about the 50th anniversary and how the merchandising and the fandom and the production around it was just kind of like had this crescendo. The first time that really happened was around the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
Where there was a big upsurgence of fandom and merchandising, and so tell us about being on the show during that time.
Well, I mean, the fun part of it was, you know, doing the show itself. So we had, you know, Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee and Carol Ann Ford and Lizzie Sladen and Wendy Padbury, you know, when they all came back. So that was fun. I don't remember huge amounts about the marketing side of it, you know, because that wasn't my remit. I seem to remember we had dolls, you know, we turned into a doll. And I might note, I am one of the few classic companions still alive who does not have their own figure. Oh. I'm just saying. It's a bit of a scandal. I'm not hurt. I think there's a market for it.
Yes.
I'll get the BBC Enterprises Twitter feed for you later.
On the 20th anniversary, one of the things that happened was the big exhibition at Longleat.
Yeah.
You were there for that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and tell us about how that was. I'm sure that was kind of an overwhelming day. It was sort of Doctor Who's Woodstock almost.
You know, 3 or 4 times as many people turned up as they expected, so they just weren't geared up for the numbers. They'd advertised it on television, and who knew that television advertising attracts people? Obviously not BBC Enterprises. So, you know, we would go around in Bessie trying to sort of keep the long queues happy. And it was amazing to be, you know, behind the scenes at Longleat House, because it's one of the great stately homes of England, with a very, very eccentric owner, so whom we got to meet, he and his wifelets, or wifelings, I think they're called. We won't go there. And people queued for hours for autographs, and I was telling the story about that earlier today, because years later, a guy called Gordon wrote a story about his father and about that going to Longleat as a kid, and he was 12 and he had a crush on Tegan, a big crush on Tegan, completely understandable. Anyway, his dad had lost his job. He was an only child. His dad, and they were educating him privately, and this was a much-loved child. Blah, blah. And Dad lost his job and went into a spiral of depression. And kid was taken out of private school. Everything that they were trying to do unravelled. And but his dad really was determined that he would give his son this special treat, and by taking him to Longleat to meet me. And so he got an old car from somewhere which he did up, which could make the journey, and he got tickets, and they got down to Longleat, and then they queued for hours to meet me. Can you imagine what it would have been like if I wasn't nice to him when he got to the top? And he got to the top of the queue, and I was nice to him, and he was really chuffed to meet me. And because his father was able to accomplish that for his son, it put enough air under his wings to start lifting him out of depression. And that's when you understand what fandom can mean. And that was a story that was in one of our newspapers about 5-6 years ago. And I found that story really very moving, really moving. But it gave you a strong sense of responsibility.
What was the decision to leave the show? How did you make that decision? When did you think it was the right time to leave?
I was very lucky John Nathan Turner made that decision for me. No,
were you ready to leave them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Peter, I knew that I had, done about as long as the companions tended to do, and Peter was leaving, and John wanted a couple of companions bedded in, as it were, before Peter left, so that there was some sort of form of continuity.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He didn't take the Chris Chibnall path of slash and burn.
Mm-hmm. Your final story, though, the Dalek one.
Yeah, I love that Daleks.
It's such a good one.
I mean, I'm sorry to the companions who haven't been with the Daleks, but I don't really think that you're a companion if you haven't gone up against the Daleks. It's kind of an exclusive club.
That one has one of my favorite Tegan outfits.
Uh-huh.
Love it.
Me too, I chose it.
Oh, very nice.
I've got good taste.
Obviously.
Bring up the shoes.
Yeah.
I said the other day, Dan, who knew that he could be so tolerant? Aren't they cute? Those are cute shoes. Thank you, Atlanta. Every time I wear these, I would think of Atlanta.
Oh, nice. But those aren't Puma or Adidas.
No, but I haven't managed to track those down
Okay.
yet, because I have small feet. I've got little trotters, and so it's difficult to fit my feet in adult shoe sizes.
About, 2008, we had Mary Tam at our convention, and she spent her time shopping as well. That was her goal. So,
Was it shoes?
No.
It was actually clothes for her grandchild.
Ah.
Yeah.
She liked the cotton here better than what
She's right, yeah, the cotton. And your clothes are much less expensive than they are in England.
She'd come back and show me all these clothes that she bought.
Yes. But these sneakers in England would be more in pounds than they are here in dollars.
Oh, wow.
So why not?
Absolutely.
And I wouldn't be able to get the shoe size. Listen, there aren't that many women who thought Imelda Marcus was wrong. There just aren't. As I said earlier, if I come back, I want to come back as a centipede, because I could wear 50 pairs of shoes at once.
That just lost my train of thought after that.
Well, you just have an image of me now as a centipede.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shoes will do that.
Doctor Who these days is kind of a prestige show. It tends to be a big launch for a good career. You know, look at the things that...
I know, I don't feel any envy at all.
It was not the same when you
No.
were on the show.
Absolutely not.
And it's such a different thing now than it was at the time. No.
Yeah.
I don't know, what was it like at the time leaving Doctor Who? Where do you go from there?
Well, it was really quite cold out there because in those days in British television, you know, we had between 9.5 and 11 million viewers. That's a lot of viewers in a 60 million, you know, country. That was like Doctor Who when it was at its peak, I think, in the recent, you know, when it came back, was 8, 9.
Right.
So, do you know what I mean? But it's a much more crowded market now. Anyway, so you were well known, and people went, the trouble is you're well known for Doctor Who. So we can't really cast you as, because people know you as Doctor, you know, as Doctor Who's assistant. So, and that you're Australian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was a big no-no. So I did a series called Murphy's Mob for Central, and I did a Minder, and I did a couple of bits and pieces, and I did some theatre. But you know, I was getting into my 30s. I know you'll be astounded to hear that that was like nearly 40 years ago that I was in my 30s, but that's the truth. And I'm astounded. Anyway, so it was really quite hard. And then I was looking at casting brief after casting brief, and there was nothing I could play. You know, there were no parts for the women. It's slightly better now, but not hugely. So I got involved in starting what became Women in Film and Television UK, and I ran that for the first 4 years because I thought either I accept the situation and the status quo, or I become part of trying to change it.
Yeah.
So I decided to become part of trying to change it.
Do you think that the situation we have in television now is as a result of you and that organization?
Well, it was already established in the United States, but they
Yeah.
didn't admit actresses. And so I actually was involved in a group called Real Women prior to starting. And we threw in some of us threw in our lot with Women in Film and Television because they were already, we found out there was this other group starting up. And then they had a board of directors. And the board, the women in Britain were going to follow the American model and not admit actresses. And I went, are you kidding? You know, we suffer the sharp end of the discrimination. You know, that's just not right. So, and I persuaded them to admit actresses. And I believe the American chapters now do as well. But it's better, but it's certainly not perfect. And I've gone back and served at various times on the board of directors. And, you know, trying to sort of improve the research into why some women succeed in some of the key grades, which the 4 key creative grades where women are very underrepresented are screenwriting, directing, sound, and camera. So the idea is to try and improve that participation by women and create an industry which is not as hostile. It's quite a hostile environment. And people go, oh, you know, the trouble with women is that they will have babies and then they can't, you know, give it all the time that it needs. And you go, well, there's 2 things to say. One is that the working days are too long and therefore that makes sets very dangerous places. And nobody should be working sort of relentlessly working those long days. And B, women are already on sets working the longest hours there are because the wardrobe, for instance, and makeup, which are heavily dominated by women, are there long before the camera department and the sound department and whatever turn up. So what the hell? You know, and they're there after. So, you know, I could go on infinitely and bore the pants off you, but you know.
In addition to acting, you have been an agent as well.
I have. I was Paul McGann's agent.
You were. You were his agent when he got Doctor Who, is that right?
I did, yeah. It was his interview for Doctor Who was one of the first calls I took. I thought, bloody hell, it doesn't pursue you.
Did you try to talk him out of it?
No.
Okay.
But I did tell him his life would never be the same.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have some questions in the audience. Who would like to ask Ms. Janet a question?
You want a mic?
Sure. I was going to walk around with one, but... Okay.
You can start. So hi again.
Hi.
So again, welcome back to Atlanta.
Thank you.
And John Nathan Turner.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk to us a little bit about John? I'm not asking for dirt, but there was a book that came out about 5 or 6 years ago that painted him in a very disparaging light. And was just wondering if you have anything to say opposite against that, or is there what you might just want to say about John?
Well, the disparaging things that were said were things that I have no knowledge of. That's all I can say. What can I say? He was a friend. We kind of lost contact when I was running Women in Film. There was one memorable night when Sarah Lee, who was John's PA, had stayed a friend, and she and Peter Davison and I closed the Soho House at 3 o'clock in the morning. Peter was in the West End, so he would often go to the Soho House afterwards. Anyway, it seemed like a good idea to keep partying. So we went back to Sarah's place and opened another bottle of wine and thought it was a good time at about 3:30 in the morning to phone John. And it was the night that Princess Diana died. So I know when it was. Because Sarah phoned me not long after I got home and said, you know, Princess Diana's died. But John was delighted to hear from us and was awake. And little did I know that, we could hear that he wasn't well. The truth was we'd heard that he wasn't well, and none of us had seen him for a while. And so we phoned to tell him we missed him. And the next thing was he died.
Wow.
Had terrible taste in clothing, though. And I think it's a testament to my warm and loving nature that I forgive him for that boob tube costume.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of costumes, there weren't very many costume changes from story to
Tell
story.
me about it.
You basically...
Lalla Ward, every bloody story, she was in a new costume. Not that I feel any envy.
More questions?
Come on up.
Come up. This way. There you go.
It seems like a little thing.
Did you have any say-so about your hair or your nail color or things like that on the show?
I did after a while, but not initially. And John wanted that hideous hairstyle that I started out with that took forever to do, which meant that my hair was snapping off because it took so much treatment.
With all the curls?
With all the curls, because in those days, BBC Wardrobe used to use Marcel tongs, which they used in the 1930s. And Marcel tongs, you put them in a little oven, put them in the oven, you heated them up, you clamped them onto a tissue, and you watched the tissue sizzle away to nothing, and then they put them on your hair. And we were shooting one day, and the makeup lady was doing this through my head. And I went, what? And she said, nothing. So I thought, I'll just... And I could feel all the stubble, because my hair was snapping off, you know. So...
What can you share about the Seventh Doctor auditions?
Oh yeah, with Sylvester. I don't remember the other people who auditioned, but I do remember auditioning Sylvester, whom I knew anyway, because I don't know what it is about Doctor Who's. Quite a few of them have crossed my path before Doctor Who, as it were. You know? Yeah. And Sylvester was one of the first people I met early on when I came to England, because we both worked with Ken Campbell. He worked with Ken Campbell in the Roadshow, and I worked with Ken Campbell in the Science Fiction Theatre of Liverpool. And I did this, and Ken was the reason I stayed in England. I was going back to start a theatre company with a friend, and Ken said, "What are you doing?" What are you doing? He sort of talked like that. And I said, "Well, I'm going back to start this theatre company." He went, "Well, I like what you and that other girl do, you're tank actresses." Really? Yeah. Tank actresses. We don't see tank actresses too often in England. So, you know, and I'm doing this opera, blah, blah, blah. So we used to do this opera, which was based on an H.P. Lovecraft story, The Case of Charles Dexter Ward. And Sylvester used to come in and make weird noises in the chorus. Because we used to do weird necromancy noises.
Have you watched any of the new Doctor Who stories?
Yeah, loads.
If you've seen this one particular scene, how did you react, if you've seen it, of your character being briefly referenced in a new Doctor Who story?
Yeah, by Matt Smith at Mark Gatiss. He didn't turn up, because usually Peter Davison has a Christmas party, and Mark Gatiss is usually there. Stephen Moffat's always there. I'm always there. Anyway, that year he didn't show up. And I'm here to tell you, it's just as well.
My favorite episode of yours was Enlightenment. I thought it was so wonderful and all.
Oh,
Did you like that dress that you had?
Oh, that Edwardian dress, yeah, it was great.
You looked great in it.
Thank you very much.
But I also want to say, you said there was no figures of you? Just a second. Yes, there are.
Oh, those.
Yes.
Oh, did you make them?
No, a fellow in England hand-painted these.
I was going to say, somebody else once gave me one of these figures, and then somebody else broke it. So thank you. I still have Peter.
Pewter.
Yeah, I have Peter
Like a
somewhere.
plasticky kind of thing.
I think they're. Do you? Thank you. That's not what I'm talking about, though. I'm talking about a bigger figure. Yeah.
Full size.
Not the size, but you know, bigger.
Like the pop again?
Hi. You also briefly returned as Tegan for the little short special with Colin Baker on Jen Will Fix It, and briefly in the 30th anniversary TV Children in Need Special Dimensions in Time. Could you please...
Did I?
Or did you?
No.
Oh, okay. But
I didn't do the 30th anniversary. I didn't do that special because I felt that I couldn't run women in film as I was, I think, at the time, or be an agent later on and act myself. That would be really cheesy, you know. So.
Shameless self-promotion, right?
Well, in a sense, you're competing with people who are your clients and stuff. I had to shut the door for a while. Yeah.
But as regards to the former, can you tell us about how you got contacted to appear on that show for that little clip with the young boy?
Well, John Nathan Turner said he wanted to be scared by a monster and he couldn't think of anybody better than me. And listen, we were great mates, so I took it in good part, sort of.
Thank you.
On a similar note, Lala Ward was once asked,
I know.
you know this one? She was once asked, what was her favorite Doctor Who monster? And she said,
Tom.
Did some of the writers or
I don't know if it was John Nathan Turner, did they came up with the name Tegan Jovanka. Was she supposed to be of like Yugoslav or Serbian?
Well,
descent?
I don't know why he had this sort of fascination, John Nathan Turner, with Marshal Tito's wife. It's like kind of random, don't you think? Anyway, he did, and they couldn't decide whether it would be Tegan or Jovanka, and then they settled on Tegan Jovanka. And I assumed that she had a Serbian antecedent.
Thank you. We haven't had any questions about Big Finish.
No.
So let's talk about Big Finish for a little bit. You were a little hesitant to get involved in Big Finish for quite a while, and you were finally asked.
Yeah, I thought I'd be rubbish at it.
Is that?
Yeah. Anyway, Gary Russell talked me into it. And he was doing his last show, and I said, okay, I'll do one. I'll just do one. It'll be your last story. Bastard killed me off.
Oh.
Lucky it's a time travel show, so that doesn't matter. I had such a good time. Took the mickey out of Peter Davison. Always fun.
Yes.
And we had a great time. So, you know, we worked together now for so long that we've got a shorthand, and you know, we know how it goes. And it's really interesting because from time to time Peter's doing something else and we have to have somebody read in maybe. And it's interesting when somebody else does it. Peter's really irritating because he doesn't do much preparation, just putting it mildly, A. And B, he can read a script so fast and he can drive it so quickly with such energy. And you watch other people who try to give it that same oomph, and they just can't deliver it. It's amazing. He's an incredible actor, actually. Because he makes everything look easy, it's very easy to underestimate what he's doing and how complicated and actually involved he is. You know, you can watch Peter appear as a villain in the, you know, a sort of villain in At Home with the Braithwaites or in Midsummer Murders, and he's utterly convincing. It doesn't look as though he's acting at all, and yet he's totally different. And that's the mark, to me, that's the mark of a really good actor. I hate seeing actors work. I don't want to see them work. I want to see them just be the character. What I love about most American actors on screen is that you don't see them working. It's just they inhabit the character. And that's what I think Peter's so good at. Don't tell him I said so.
Your secret is safe with us.
Yes.
You did Kinda. The
Yep.
following season was Snake Dance,
Yeah.
which was amazing, and you were brilliant in.
Thank you.
In Big Finish, that comes back around in Cobwebs. We get the Mara again. Do you remember much about that one?
No.
Actually, it was Cradle of the Snake.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. If anybody's going to correct me, it'll be him. No, you're absolutely right.
You're the oracle. You're the oracle. To be honest with you, I don't really.
Yeah.
There's something about doing the radios, because you don't rehearse them, because you don't have a visual signature to them, I really find it hard often to remember. It's like, I don't know if you use a Kindle. Do you know the difference between reading a Kindle and reading a book? You know how, when I read a book, I can often remember passages of it because I have a visual memory that relates to where that bit of the book is physically in the book.
Right.
And you don't get that with a Kindle. And there's something a bit similar, I find, with the Big Finish. I mean, I do my prep and I enjoy doing them, and I like to think that I work hard at it. But I often don't remember because I don't have that visual connection to it.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your reaction when you found the news?
Well, I mean, I thought it was about time we had a woman. I really,
Without a doubt.
And I had always been a little bit worried about it because I thought whoever has that role, people will load so much on their shoulders.
Yes.
You know, you're going to stand for all women and all that kind of rubbish, and instead of just talking about the person as an actor. So I'm quite worried about that. And for years I used to say, people ask me, I used to go, no, I don't think it should be a woman because of that.
Right.
You know. And then I just thought, there's been so much done in the show with gender fluidity by things like Missy.
Yes.
And I thought Missy had prepared the way quite well for that to be that allusion into a female doctor.
Absolutely.
And the idea of gender fluidity is much more common now than it was some years ago. So I thought that worked better.
Who's got further questions? Oh, you have.
When Peter was writing the 5-inch Doctors
Yeah.
And he asked you to, did he come to you with the idea that you'd be appearing in a thought bubble?
So what happened was, we were doing a fundraiser for the charity that I now run, called Project Motor House. And he sent me the script. Because a load of the companions were doing the fundraiser for me, it was a perfect opportunity to, for him to get all of us in one place. And so that's how it happened. I think the 5-ish Doctors reboot, I've got to be honest, I prefer it to the special.
Oh, wow.
I may be biased. That may be the case. But, I love 5-ish Doctors reboot. I wish he'd direct other things. I think he's very funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's excellent, excellent.
What did you think of Paul McGann's return in Night of the Doctor, the little short?
Oh, the Night of the Doctor, eh?
Right before the 50th anniversary, they did the little, 7-minute thing that he was...
Yes. Do you know, I don't have a very clear memory of that, and I don't know, because that was screened on the BFI, and that night was like, for us, we were being transported across from the Excel Centre, and there was all that, so we didn't really see it.
Oh, okay.
Because the night it was going out, we were actually doing other things. We were being set up for our discussion and all that sort of stuff was going on. So I don't really have a memory of that.
Hi, quick question. I don't know if you...
Hello.
Okay, there we go. So Doctor Who was exploding in America about the time that you were on the show.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like coming over here to America? What the difference was in fandom, the reaction to the program, just your take on coming over here for the first time.
Well, I thought that the American fans were much friendlier. I mean, British fandom's got better, but in the 80s, a lot of it was kind of a bit nasty, I thought, if I'm honest.
Wow, that's interesting.
I thought it was a bit like, it's our show, how dare you? How dare you come into it, And who do you think you are? You're just in the show, but we've loved it and nurtured it for 20 years. And you go, really? But that kind of thing has largely disappeared. That started, and it got nicer. And then, of course, you began to understand, so there was a generation of people that grew up with you and who were fans because you meant something to their childhood. And that's always very moving, when people say that you're a treasured part of their childhood. That's lovely. You saw me through some really difficult times watching you, and those kinds of stories come up, and that's really moving. As an actor, you find that really quite touching.
Hi, welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you. What a great shoe shop. I mean, what a great... Sorry.
So I don't know if you're aware, but Atlanta has a reputation for tearing down its it's historical architecture.
Right.
So if the audience will indulge us, I would love to hear more about Motor House.
My house.
Motor House.
Oh, Project
Motor
House. Well, the idea was to save this building, which is built into the cliff in Ramsgate. And if you've ever tried to deal with a local council, any of you who have will know the tears of frustration and rage that will give rise to. So I started 2018. We'd spent quite a bit of money, with architects and various surveyors and all sorts of structural reports because it holds up this cliff. And the cliff supports the main road into the town. And the reason I took it on was because there was a structural problem there and nobody else was addressing it. And I thought it was an ideal way to get young people who were not being catered for involved. And then last year, I started the year with a commitment of 1.5 million to redo the frame of the building, which would have allowed me to help put the rest of the structure in place. And then the leader of the council changed for the 6th time in 7 years. And every time I had to go back to square one and negotiate all over again. And this time the leader decided to sell the building. And somebody who really has no idea of the structural significance of it and how dangerous it is has bought it. And I was happily saying to anybody, look, I raised all this public money. Peter Davison helped me raise money. Peter Capaldi helped me raise money. The Companions helped me raise money. Anybody who's thinking of buying it, you can have a look at the structural reports because I think that's right. And anybody who looked at the structural reports didn't go near it in the auction. And there were a couple of people who didn't bother to look at the structural reports. And one of them bought it. Whoa, good luck with that. And we've simply continued with the youth work. So there's a youth project on at the moment. Some of the people who've been involved with our earlier projects are this weekend doing workshops with a photographer we work with, and to up their skills a bit so that they can help us. We're mentoring them by getting them to mentor younger kids and share their skills with them. And then we're doing a big art installation with a woman who is the print fellow at the Royal Academy. So what we do is try and do really high quality arts heritage-based projects with young people. And that's going well. So sod you, council.
All right, well that is about our time. Right after this, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have everybody gather out by the TARDIS and take a big group shot, and we'd love to have you join us if you would like to. Right after that, Janet will be at her autographing table for half an hour.
Or less.
Or less.
Well, because I'm going out to dinner.
Right.
Yeah.
Feed me.
So stop by her table, get an autograph. We have the exclusive prints that our artist George Genty did, who, if you pick up one of those, you can have Janet sign that. So, meet us out by the
If you're very nice to me, I'll sign it.
Thank you so much, Janet, for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And don't forget the cabaret at 7 p.m. in this room. Get your ticket to the cabaret. Cabaret starts at 7.